You know him, you love him, he should be locked up. It's Olaf Furniss, ladies and gentlemen. He should be in the jail. And these two handsome young gentlemen on my right-hand side and on your left, Martin Smith and Brodie Smithers. Long-standing members of the Born to Be Wide Club. First and foremost, how do you guys know each other? How did you all meet?
I was a friend. My girlfriend was friends, an ex-flatmate with Olaf, so that's how I came across them. I didn't know him professionally. I knew him as a friend before I knew him as a kind of music industry guru.
And Brodie?
We can't actually remember when we met, but we certainly worked together in London. My brother and Olaf go back quite a long way, so yeah.
Okay, tell me why you started Born to Be Wide. Because, you know, Glasgow is always seen as Scotland's, you know, pop and rock metropolis. It's the centre place. But, you know, obviously you've decided to remain in Edinburgh. Was that something that was important to you when you started?
Yeah, well, I think what it was, Brodie and I had just moved back to Edinburgh from London, and we could see there was music happening here. Brodie was an A&R scout, and I was Billboard's correspondent for Scotland. And to be honest, we got really pissed off having to go to Glasgow all the time, every time there was a launch. And we were like, well, someone should do something here to bring everyone together, because every time we want to see someone, we've got to go to Glasgow. And it was really Brodie that had the idea.
So what was the idea then?
Well, Olaf was the German correspondent to the magazine we were working on called Phono, which Dave Balfour, actually, funnily enough, worked at with us too. And he was stationed out in Hamburg, so I'd come out to visit him, and we went on a night out there, funnily enough. And there was a kind of industry night that was going on there that the Germans did, which was, you know, basically anybody who was involved in the music industry over there, which is significantly bigger than here, would come out and just have a beer and network and kind of play some tunes. And I remember seeing this kind of middle-aged German guy in a suit and sort of specs playing AC/DC, and he was like, I don't know, the accountant for BMG Germany or something, you know what I mean? And I just thought, oh, that's a really good idea, actually, and that's kind of what you would like to galvanise in Scotland. So that's where it came from.
And it's been in 4 different venues now. Started in the Venue, which no longer exists, is the Ingleby Gallery now. Then it went to the Street, top of Broughton Street, then the Voodoo Rooms, and finally Electric Circus. Tell us about the very first Born to Be Wide, if you can remember, Olaf.
Well, it's funny this, because much like how Brodie and I can't actually remember where we met, or when we knew roughly when we'd met. I was thinking about this the other day, and I was like, who was actually at that first Born to Be Wide? Martin, you were, weren't you? Because you came to every one, and then you got roped into it. It turns out you were, and you were DJing with Muslim, and
I didn't realise that was the first one. I can remember DJing at it, because if that was the very first one, I did CDs, Muslim did vinyl, because there was only one vinyl deck working and one CD deck working. So
sounds about right.
Yeah, it does sound. It's just the same here, yeah.
Sorry, apologies, Joe.
Not when Joe's on, but it has happened, let's put it that way, on the night we had someone DJing with vinyl only. So, yeah, I can't actually remember too many people that were there, but we took over the top floor of the venue, as it was then, and then soon realised by the second time we did it 2 weeks later that it was maybe a bit ambitious for upstairs, so we were kind of relegated to the cooler, which was this, for the young ones among you, it was kind of a basement with dirty wooden floors and you know, kind of a bit skanky but really good. And I'd been at a lot of clubs there and stuff, so we moved down there and then just started inviting people to come and DJ.
So who actually came along, and was there some kind of ethos behind it all?
The ethos was just beer and music, really. That was it. You know?
So there was no seminars or talks or anything like that?
None of that stuff. It was just a free night there. I mean, it being free, as you'll see here, there's no substitute for price. And it was absolutely, that was the sort of thing. We just wanted a night out where we could get drunk in Edinburgh with people from the music industry and not have to get the CityLink bus back at 3 a.m. There was no real agenda. We just thought, let's get some people down to play some records who you wouldn't normally expect to play records or you wouldn't normally see playing records, and let's get drunk.
And Martin, you were at all of them to begin with. What attracted you? I mean, apart from the fact that you were pals with Olaf, what brought you along to these things?
Well, I'd been doing music videos down in London, first of all, after doing them in Edinburgh, first of all. I went down to London and worked for a couple of years doing them in London. And I came back up to Scotland and I did kind of videos with the Chemical Underground guys, Arab Strap, Malcolm Middleton, all that lot. And there was one thing that I noticed, you know, from being at the early Born to Be Wide and from being in the Glasgow scene was much more ambitious. It was much more connected. It seemed to have a kind of togetherness, and there was an element of collaboration which I just didn't see in Edinburgh at all. And when you guys sort of talked about, oh, well, you should get on board, I was beginning to think about, oh, well, maybe it wouldn't just be musicians, it would maybe be a broader thing where you could get filmmakers or photographers and creative industries and that kind of thing tied in as well. But it definitely, what interested me, first of all, you could see some artists, because it was, you know, I mean, I think maybe the first time, you know, sometimes there was 6 people there, 10 people there, you know, it was tiny. And then word of mouth, it got a little bit more. And I kind of really respected seeing the people who came time and time again. You know, the Found guys came quite a lot. You came quite a lot. Jimmy Hooverfish came quite a lot. There was some, and I just thought, I kind of respect that. I'm really into people who are committed to what they want to do. It's not just a kind of thing where you turn up and you do it a wee bit and then you bugger off. And personally, I thought Edinburgh was a bit like that. And I thought something like Born to Be Wide might kind of have a little bit of a core and start people talking. And I started to see that. I started to see people, you know, electronic artists who are having conversations with kind of more trad rock artists and all that kind of stuff. I talk about them like artists. I mean, it's just, you know, the punters who are coming along, but that's to give them the respect. But as I say, I had a kind of a bit of a green eye on the whole Glasgow scene. You know, even the fact that you know, something like Reindeer Section, which was like a collaboration of, you know, Snow Patrol and, you know, Belle and Sebastian or whatever, all those different artists who were kind of collaborating together, not necessarily exactly the same ethos, but that idea of a kind of club, and it wasn't covering their homework, you know what I mean? There was a collaborative vibe, and I think Born to Be Wide, for me, felt like it could be something like that.
And why did you personally want to get involved? Because you were just going along and as a punter, but then you sort of helped with the organisational side of things. What did that actually entail, and why did you get involved?
That entailed me trying to corral Olaf into staying focused and turning up at 9. Was it 9 o'clock we used to start at? That was quite a feat. I think that's about breakfast time for Olaf.
Some things haven't changed. Don't tell Mikey. Yeah, the other thing is that Brodie and I realised that we needed someone else, so Martin didn't really have much choice. It was like, who's been...
You were railroaded into it then.
Yeah. In those early days as well, it was just things like getting an email database up and just emailing people and trying to encourage people to come along, because until you knew about it, you didn't really understand what it was all about. And I think you had to experience it to understand. I mean, and it wasn't as ambitious as what Born to Be Wide is now. It was definitely the idea of a social. What the guys had, it was that vibe was what it was, is people would turn up and you'd start talking, how you doing? You know, guys from Benbecula would give you their CDs and you would get an idea of what was going on in the local scene. And you could definitely see the ones who were going to stick with it. And then there was ones who would turn up and, you know, they weren't going to be in it for the long run.
And what did you do for funding, considering it was admission free, and what did you do? And how did you spread the word of flyers and that kind of thing?
Well, I've got some flyers here, but I don't know, Brodie, do you remember we had like the venue got us some drinks company that gave us 50 quid a month? It was something like a... It was like a bourbon...
That's funding, ladies and gentlemen.
Did you tell us about that, Olaf?
No, well, we used to spend that, basically the venue...
chocolate liqueur, did you get tons of it?
Okay, yeah, I do.
Can you remember? It was called Mud Flaps or something like that. And
it was Mackinnon, yeah.
Dear me.
No, so we didn't have any posters, so there's nothing to put on well, that's the first and only poster we had in those days, right? And then that design got recycled a couple of times, and this is our flyers, right? So I don't know if any of you have been in the St. James's Centre, but they've got this machine for printing business cards. And the thing is that there was pretty much, it was 2 quid for 20, wasn't it? And
that's quite a good one, though. There's no typos on it.
I don't know, is that the right spelling of Bruce's name?
Yeah, is there a D in your name, Bruce?
Is that honest?
Ah, shit. Usually, you know, we've misspelled it half the time as well. It has to be said.
He did that one off.
Here's another one. This is on King Creosote. I've got a few actually. There was one with a truck on it as well, and as Brodie says, like they did generally have some kind of typo, a spelling mistake. What was the one you mentioned earlier on?
It was 2 U's and Thursday on one of them. Yeah,
yeah, I think we got the website name wrong once as well. And usually there were like some sort of Rajas standing in the machine next to us trying to, you know, those cloth things that come down. You get a plastic egg out, and then there's a photo machine as well, so it could be quite stressful. So you're trying to type everything in, and there's like all these Rajas round about, and you just want to get away, you know. So yeah, that's what I blame the mistakes on. The reason that we have spelling mistakes in all our press releases to this day is entirely unconnected.
Did these flyers and unique business cards work? Did anyone come?
Yeah, but you know, it's interesting this because I think in a lot of respects, what we learned very early on was that the only way you're going to get people to come was if you actually harangued them personally, and that was as much for just your general people in the scene as it was for the DJs.
Well, tell us, who did you have DJing to begin with? The first sort of couple of years. Anyone stand out?
Phil Kay was probably our first big guest, if you like. James Yorkston, I guess.
I've got a picture of James here somewhere.
I liked all the Fence guys, and like, you know, John McClane from the Aliens, or formerly Beater Band.
There's James Yorkston.
Yeah.
Man, I grew up with James. He's had that record since he was about 5. Can't believe he brought that one along.
You played it as well because people were allowed to play whatever they wanted. And then,
apart from
you'd also get kind of interesting, like, international acts. Remember Radio 4 from New York? They were playing in town. Sometimes we would have the sense to kind of look at the gig listings and think, right, okay, Patti Smith's playing in town. That never happened. But, you know, Radio 4, Fire Engines, you got the Fire Engines to come, and they did an in-store for you as well, Olaf, didn't they?
Oh, that was the Go-Betweens.
Go-Betweens.
Yeah. And here's the Ravenettes. I don't know, this is, we kind of... That's one half of the Ravenettes, and
you like that
we
tray,
also like to
genuinely like that tray.
Yeah. Man,
well, that's a tray, right? Great. I thought it was a box of biscuits.
It was a presentation.
I only got rid of the last one recently, Brodie. You could have had it, yeah. Denise would probably have chucked it out though. It'd have lasted about 5 minutes in your house, and. Then we've got, so this is me with a guy from the Ravenettes, who it turns out one of my mates' managers, but I didn't know that at the time. But we like to give our guests something nice to take home with them. So these guys are Danish and they live in New York, so they got a nice Scotland tray. And here's...
so is it just basically people playing some records and other people standing around boozing and handing each other CDs and that kind of stuff and chatting?
Yeah, it was pretty much like that, but we were also really proactive. So if someone came in and
beautiful moment.
Good.
didn't know someone. I mean, there weren't that many folk came, to be honest. So if you had like 30 folk in the room, one of us would know them. So if someone came in and they weren't known, we'd just kind of go, hiya, how you doing? You know, are you in a band, or do you make films, or, you know, whatever. And that's how we kind of got to know our audience. So we were really kind of on it when it came to introducing people. And
did the three of you all sort of contact various different people? I heard a story about you sending postcards to Boards of Canada. Is that right? What happened?
Oh yeah, I chased them for a long time. Yeah, I found a PO box address that apparently, because I think they had a PO box address in Edinburgh, and I was like, right, there's no way if Boards of Canada live in the region of Edinburgh or Fife or somewhere that is traceable by car or bike, that they're not going to play Born to Be Wide. And it was a great success. They replied to nothing.
I think
but did you not send them postcards from like holiday?
Yeah, repeatedly. Yeah, I love Boards of Canada.
We have to be honest about this. I mean, this is John McClane out of the Aliens, and the Beater Band also, you know, crops up in Vic's book. Let's get a mention of Vic's book in there.
Available
now, ladies and gentlemen, all good bookstores.
And
what's it called? Songs in the Key of Fife.
It's called Songs in the Key of Fife, Bruce. That's Songs in the Key of Fife, Bruce.
It's very high in the Amazon charts.
Now, John crops up in Songs in the Key of Fife, Bruce, and quite a lot.
Available now, ladies and gentlemen.
And he's a really nice bloke, and I'd see him out and about, and I'm like, do you want to come and DJ at our night? And back in those days, he was actually he was a well-kent face. I mean, he was pretty famous, and so he'd always go, yeah, I will, and then he'd never do it. And one night, I mean, I went up to him in my local pub, and I was like, so, are you going to do it or not? I feel like I'm stalking you. If you don't want to do it, just say so. And he was like, yeah, I do. And I'm like, right, wait, next month, bang, set a date. And he did, to be fair, come down and do it. But what was really difficult in the early days was actually getting Edinburgh musicians and bands that were quite well known to even return our calls. I mean, Gordon from Ball Boy was terrible.
We got him in the end, but I mean,
yeah,
Olaf
only after we got
really...
Teenage Fan Club and
the
Go-Betweens,
a Teenage Fan Club.
Olaf was
the guys
really
from Idol
dogged about getting people. I mean, he was harassing Kevin Spacey in a bar in London at one point to play Born to Be Wide. I mean, Olaf had like this thing about, anybody vaguely famous or in the music industry, he would ask, almost the first question is, will you play Born to Be Wide? Hence, we ended up getting, eventually, Teenage Fan Club, Pat Nevin, these sort of people.
Well, there's a good selection of people. There's a story surrounding Franz Ferdinand as well. What happened with them?
Can I tell the Kevin Spacey one first?
Yeah, sure.
Kevin Spacey was I think, programming the old Vic Theatre, and I would go down to the bar when I was in London because it was open late, and he was surrounded by all these handsome young men at the bar, and they were all kind of hovering around him, and I kind of interrupted his very sort of close conversation with one young chap to ask him if he could moonwalk, and he couldn't moonwalk, so I asked him if he could DJ, and he wanted to come up and DJ at Born to Be Wide, but he never took us up on it. But
next time, Olaf, next time.
Yeah, Franz Ferdinand. Well, we had a go-between for that, didn't we? It was John Clark from The Fly.
Yeah, it was John Clark, and he claimed to be a close personal friend of Alex from Franz Ferdinand, and that he was booked to come to the after show, and we made quite a big deal out of this. Took us about 3 weeks of harassing people to get it all done. And they didn't show up.
It was rammed, though. It was absolutely rammed.
So you'd advertise it as friends that are going to be DJing.
Yeah. And they were just in their ascendancy. Do you know what I mean? It was Take Me Out. It was so exciting. So the place is jam-packed. It's the downstairs venue, which we've normally got. The venue like that, they get wind of Franz Ferdinand playing. So they open up the upstairs venue as well. We've got 2 floors of folk. Everyone's got it. So they're so excited. They've got their wee skinny ties on and all that lot. And is it not true, Olaf, that someone who happened to be DJing at the time did have a white shirt and a skinny tie on?
I said this to Brodie. I turned around to Brodie, I'm like, have you thought what would happen if they don't show up? Because I'm always really optimistic, It's like, what could possibly go wrong? The Franz Ferdinand don't show up. And, we're looking at it and we're like phoning John, and John's phoning Alex Kapranos, and it's going. And by the end, what was it? We sent someone out to John Clark. This was his punishment. He got sent out with a friend of ours who wasn't drinking to look for Franz Ferdinand.
So what, you had people combing the streets of Edinburgh trying to find him?
In the city.
Are you Franz Ferdinand? Are you?
His punishment was that he ended up in this shithole called the West End subway, and of course, it's not the sort of place you want to be detaining yourself for any length of time.
I think he paid to get in as well.
Right, excellent. And then he was like, having established that they weren't in there, he wanted to leave. But his driver, she decided that they should dance to Bryan Adams. And so before leaving, they had to listen to Bryan Adams, and he had to go and dance to it, like to get out of the place, and then get a lift back. But yeah, I said to Brodie, what should we do? And Brodie just had this kind of like knowing smile, like looking quite pleased with himself. He's like, I've already thought of that. I've asked Whitelaw to DJ, and Whitelaw was a journalist, Paul Whitelaw, who was quite an accomplished music journalist, and he just happened to, that was his normal gear, like shirt, white shirt, skinny tie, side parting. You know what? Only the people we told didn't realise that Franz Ferdinand didn't DJ that night. And the venue loved us because they didn't mind because it was rammed. And the owner of the venue, Stuart, got to DJ. So he got to completely self-indulge at his own club. And everyone was happy except for me. I mean, I sort of stalked them a couple of times. I harangued them at the book festival once, but...
Did you not try to get them for tonight as well?
Yeah. Well, they wouldn't even even come when you asked them, yeah?
It's true enough.
Olaf, tonight.
So Paul Whitelaw, the journalist, was Franz Ferdinand that night.
That's right. Tonight, Paul Whitelaw, you are Nick McCarthy.
Okay.
Lots of dry ice and a skinny tie. No bother.
It was one of my greatest pleasures, actually, that I was at 80 in the list top 100 and Franz Ferdinand were 92, and I thought, got ya.
Yeah, nice one. Tell us about Joe Mangle from Neighbours. That's Mark Little. There was a night when he came down, or...
Yeah, I looked at
Have you got any photos?
This is, you know...
While we're on this era of Born to be Wide, I think we should kind of tell this story. Why don't you explain? Or have you got some?
For the younger members of the audience, there's a terrible Australian soap opera that had record viewing figures in the 80s called Neighbours. And this guy was the kind of lout character and kind of a really nice bloke, actually. I'd met him at the film festival party when it was still in August the night before, and I didn't know who he was at first. I was just admiring his sandals. And then my mate's whispering, going, "That's Mark Little." And I'm like, "Oh, my friend sold you a quarter of hash back in 1990. And he was like, "Oh, I remember that." And so we got chatting. I asked him if he wanted to DJ. It was a really good night. The owner of the street, Wendy, she was loving it because there was Fran from Travis there. There was Adam Buxton from Adam and Joe. And it was a bit of a kind of like... showbiz hangout that night.
It was the big Edinburgh Festival night, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And the festival nights are always something quite special. So here we've got Joe Mangle posing for me, right? His name's actually Mark Little. I'll tell you another bit of detail of that in a minute. Now, there's something that kind of gives a clue to what's about to happen. That hand sticking out, I think it's Kev from Found. And
Are any of the Found guys in tonight?
Tommy was meant to be coming, but he wasn't there that night. Tommy was always the better behaved one. But, the next thing, one of them took a photo of him. Look, he's got a cigarette in his hand. That cigarette was then flicked at Kev. And then you can see behind him there's Ziggy. And Ziggy's just about to get his bag. And at that point, it all kicked off. So Ziggy knocked into him. This guy's quite a big Aussie bloke, and Ziggy's quite a small Scottish bloke. And Joe was like, Mark Little, leaned over and sort of started pointing at Ziggy. And I think Ziggy just kind of punched him lightly on the chin. And with that, he lunged at him. But you see, he's got those headphones on. The headphones saved Ziggy.
Did they sort of garrote him?
Well, yeah, that's what happened. He ripped out the mixing desk because he lunged with such force, but the headphones were properly wedged in. So he pulled out the mixing desk, but that pulled him back, and then I intervened, and it was all the kind of squaring up thing. Someone went down and got Wendy, the owner, and Wendy was like, "What's going on?" And she kind of calmed things down in that kind of traditional British landlady kind of way, and defuse the situation. But then she made the mistake of going, "Look, Joe." And
my fucking name is Mark Little.
It was like, "My name's not fucking Joe Mangle." And he stormed out. And if any of you have been downstairs in the street, there's a kind of window and you can see people going up the stairs. You could just see this figure disappearing up the stairs, and then suddenly it's coming back down again, and I'm like, "Oh shit, now he's going to come and attack me." But he didn't. He stood in the door and he went, "Olaf, you're a cunt," and that was it. He was off, and I felt really bad about it because it was. I still don't really know how it all kind of came about.
It started because the Found boys were doing photographs where they were doing "I crash you" with mobile phones, and so they were making little kind of things where they were kind of doing flick photographs with his face in it. As I'm assured.
Well, I think it's an achievement to get Joe Mangle to DJ in your club, and it's also pretty good that one I found kicked his ass. That's kind of like a brief summary and some stories about the first few years of Born to Be White. So it was the venue to begin with, then the street, and then it moved to a different venue, and also these guys kind of moved away from the project a little bit. Brodie, you were going to say something.
I was we did actually play the Queen's Hall one night.
All right, cool. Tell us a bit about that.
I would, but I actually can't remember much of it except for ejecting a CD in the middle of playing. We were in the bar, above the bar, and it was a kind of, I can't remember what it was, a kind of Edinburgh Collective night or something?
Yeah, it was Gav actually. It was a Spectrum night. Gav with a hat there. It was one of his nights.
So we played upstairs in the Queen's Hall.
We took our own carry-out, though, in typical Born to Be White style. It was like we'd get this sponsor money, that's what I was going to say, from Mud Flaps or whatever this stuff was called, right? And we'd spend it on Red Stripe, because they sold Red Stripe in the venue, and then we'd just take a cool box and drink our own Red Stripe behind the decks.
You're not doing that here, I hope.
No, they don't sell Red Stripe.
Oh, well, there you go.
Please, drink responsibly.
But I did one in Mexico City once as well.
Really? You didn't tell me that. Born to Be White in Mexico City.
Yeah, I just got...
Who was guest DJ there?
It was a mate of mine, Hector Mijangos, who licensed all the...
Of course it was, indeed.
He actually licensed Morrissey for Mexico, funnily enough.
Close to your heart.
And there was some local artists and stuff. Yeah, I did it dressed as a Mexican police.
Did you let him play Morrissey?
No, I didn't. No, of course not.
Well,
and, I have to say as well, we had Kevin Cumming, who made his name photographing Joy Division and Morrissey. And I said to him, look, just one thing where we're asking you to DJ, but we don't allow Joy Division or the Smiths or Morrissey. And he just looked at me, he's like, why do you think I would want to play them? And I want to play Adam and the Ants. And that was it. Yeah, he had, he's quite happy to make loads of money out of it.
Why, just quickly, why the Joy Division Morrissey Smiths thing? Because I'm sure there are people here wondering, but also others out there just thinking, why such a policy?
Well, we used to have... I hated Smiths fans when I was growing up.
I was a huge Smiths fan. Just
me too.
Lay that on the record.
But you see, the thing is that Martin hated Peaches, so particular.
No, I love Peaches. What happened was Peaches got played by about every DJ for the first 6 times. So then you banned Peaches, specifically "Fuck the Pain Away." That was
banned Peaches, but I banned Joy Division because people kept playing "Love Will Tear Us Apart," and it was just like, you can play what you want and you fucking play that, yeah? People are trying to have a night out. And so we kind of dispensed with that. And then I realized that it actually really irritated some people. They got quite indignant, so obviously I had to keep the policy, When Martin left, I kind of rescinded the thing with Peaches. But funnily enough, no one ever played it after that, yeah.
Martin, you just mentioned you leaving. Why did you sort of relinquish your role in Born to Be White and move on?
Terribly boring reasons. My career started to pick up and I didn't have enough time to do it. It is quite a time-consuming thing, and if you're going to do it properly, you've got to email people, you've got to kind of, and it was a lot of that actually. It was just trying to get in contact with people, and I guess by that time we were trying to get listings in magazines and stuff like that as well, and it was just at the point where I think I'd started building my house as well, and I'd realised, right, wait a minute, I just discovered that if I build a house and I've got very limited time, if I use that very limited time to do work which is very, very important to me, and at that point it was filmmaking and has remained so, then it was worthwhile. And as it turned out, I won some awards after it, and I was like, right.
A Scottish BAFTA, ladies and gentlemen. Come on, round of applause for Martin. Woo!
So it was worthwhile, and it was with regret, but I just, I wasn't doing any more music videos anymore, so how much was I in touch with who I was? One of the things I did love about, and Olaf touched on it earlier on, there could be a new act who'd not released anything. They were just recording along in Granton or whatever, and one of the best things about Born to Be White was we would always side up to them and say, how are you doing? Have you met Willie? Or have you met Olaf? Because if they came to somewhere like Born to Be Wide, they wanted to find out about something, and you could be really flippant about that and say, "Oh, I'm not gonna bother." But I think all of us guys were really, really committed to it. And once I knew that I wasn't going to have that 100% time of doing it, it was like, right, get someone who does, and that's what Olaf did.
And what are you doing now? Just before we say cheerio to you,
I am on a plane to Berlin tomorrow morning to go to the Berlin Film Festival. One of my new short films is playing over there, and developing my first feature film as well.
Excellent. Brodie, you also sort of moved away from the fold. What was your reckoning and reasoning behind all that?
Mine was largely down to two things: changing career and a family, really. That was the two things that sort of did that. I think you're going to...
there's a rugby as well, Brodie.
There was definitely an
Tell them about the
rugby.
rugby.
But I think, as you're going to allude to later, the music industry suffered a massive change, shall we say. And there's not a lot of money in it now, and there certainly wasn't then. So I took a change of career and kids, mortgage and all that sort of stuff, and I just couldn't come out to play on a Thursday night.
Fair enough. What about the rugby?
Yeah, I left to play some rugby.
So what, on Thursday night? It was rugby night?
It is training Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Okay, well, there you go. Fair enough. Look, great to have these two gentlemen on the panel, so please give them a huge round of applause. Martin and Brodie.
Could I just say as well, in recognition of your services to wideness, and Michael, I have to say this is why I was late earlier on, because I've had these trophies for several years, right? But I finally got round to getting them engraved, and the engraver lad made the classic mistake, right, of putting Born to Be Wild on there, right? So
that's even better. That's even better.
My wonderful girlfriend Yannicka went back and said he was I'll do it tomorrow, first thing tomorrow morning. She was like, no, you'll do it now. And so the guy actually stayed open an extra 20 minutes to print. Never mind the BAFTA. Here's your Born to Be Wide award. Here's a Waitrose bag for you as well. And Brodie, here's your Born to Be Wide award. Don't let Denise see it. You'll have to put it in your shed or something where you keep your toxic chemicals. Thanks very much. Here's a bag. So now we have...
so now I'd like to welcome on stage two gentlemen who have been helping out with Born to Be Wide for the last 6 years or so. Derick Mackinnon and Michael Lambert. Please give them a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
So
moving on, we're now in the Voodoo Rooms, your third venue.
No,
is that
in
right?
The street.
Are we still in the street? Right.
So when Martin went off to become a successful filmmaker, I'd reached this stage where I was like, should I continue? It's a bit much to do on my own. And I had a chat with Wendy, and she was like, well, I'd like it to continue if you want to do it, and I think she even offered to give us 10% off the bar downstairs, but they were so busy making cocktails that
we did actually get that.
Yeah, but it was pretty much worthless. It was about 14 quid or something, because they'd spend so long making these cocktails that everyone would go to the bar upstairs and buy their booze there. So
how did you know Derick? How did Derick get involved?
Because he came to Born to Be Wide.
I used to work at Verdun Studios, and that's Gavin behind the sound desk recording us right now. It was actually Gavin that introduced me to Born to Be Wide. Headed down with Gavin one night, checked it out, and at the time, I just started my own promotions company, Newfound Sound, and everyone ignored me. All the media ignored me. So, first night down at Born to Be Wide, it was like music editor Mark, from everyone in the music industry, everyone in media was sitting in the street downstairs, and started returning my phone calls and emails.
Was it just the fact that you could go directly up to them and chat to them specifically about whatever you were working on, rather than that email or phone call thing when you're so detached?
I think it was because it was only them there as well. I seen Born to Be Wide. It was like it was definitely a music industry night, as everyone's described so far. It was basically Olaf and his music industry pals having a bevy. And that was about the only people that were there as well. So, but yeah, I think it was because, like they've described, Olaf was a fantastic host as well. So a new face that came down with Gavin one night. All right, so, and he found out a little bit about what I was doing, proceeded to introduce me to absolutely everybody in the room, and it kind of went from there. I started going religiously. Yeah, because I used to go down to pretty much every night because I could see the value in it. Obviously, the first night I went there, I benefited quite a bit from it, from getting coverage and stuff for all my gig nights. I just really liked it, and it was, it helped me out on everything I was trying to do. And then there came a stage where, Brodie and Martin had kind of left, and Olaf was he was contemplating whether or not he was going to continue. And I thought, it's definitely something people need in Edinburgh. And
well, with no disrespect to those two, or to Olaf for that matter, I think when you got involved, it seemed to get slightly more organised, or it seemed to gather momentum slightly. Would you agree with that? I mean, it seemed to... Maybe he just emailed me more, I'm not sure, but...
Yeah, I think he probably did email you more, sort of harangued you a bit more, and I think it also coincided. There was this... We were out the street for a little while longer, and then the Voodoo Rooms opened, and... Our pals from Limbo had started their night in the Voodoo Rooms, and the Voodoo Rooms just made us a reasonable offer, which was like, we'll give you £100 in the venue if you want to come and do it here. And we're like, wow, that's great. Because we were used to getting like 20 quid, which we'd usually spend on sort of someone's train fare who'd come through to Glasgow to DJ. Kind of ironic that you still end up paying for like,
train fare,
to have something in
even though you're
Edinburgh
staying
with
in
people
Edinburgh.
from Glasgow, to see people from Glasgow, but it kind of worked. And then we moved to the Voodoo Rooms, and that's where there's a guy called Martin Atkins. Actually, the photo was not very good, so I won't use it, but he'd our first night at the Voodoo Rooms, which was in 2008, I'd met this guy, Martin Atkins, who used to be in Killing Joke and a band called Pigface, and
he played in Public Image Limited for a bit,
and
Ministry and things like that.
He'd written a book about touring called Tour Smart. So as well as DJing, he wanted to do a talk, and I was a bit like, oh man, that's a hassle. And then I got sent this sort of tech rider, and I'm like, what does that mean? And then I phoned the Voodoo Rooms, and they're like, yeah, of course we've got that. Yeah, we'll set it up. And I'm like, all right, cool. So he came and did a talk, and it was mobbed by our standards, because, I mean, it was, there were one night, I think it was the Fusiliers, that was the record low turnout. There was them and us, and I think Colin Somerville. And that was it.
And it was still just a sort of drinking club on a Thursday night every couple of Thursdays.
Well, what are you going to do? You committed to the night, so you just you're in a pub, and sometimes you'd hope there'd be some walk-ups and stuff, so people that just ventured into the street. I mean, that was what was interesting about the street as well, because it was pretty much a gay bar, so you could have all these indie pop stars and go-betweens fans or something, and then there'd be a couple of guys snogging in the corner and stuff, and it was quite an unusual mixture for a venue. But I think it worked really well. But if we hadn't moved, then we wouldn't have. The seminar thing just came about by.
So Martin Atkins doing his kind of key to touring chat was the first ever seminar you had, and it was kind of foisted upon you, right?
Yeah. But people loved it, so we're like, oh, let's do this again. So we did a management one, I think, and then a music journalism one, and so it went on. And
so, Michael, you must have been coming down to these nights, but by this point, were you going down to the street at this point, or?
Derick invited me down to Born to Be Wide, because Derick was running like gig nights pretty much every night of the week or something.
That was the Mill, was it?
No, it was, you were running nights at Subway Cowgate. And I was
Olaf's favourite venue.
No, Subway West End, Derick. You never quite reach those heights, or rather depths.
So I was like hassling Derick for a gig. Derick, give me a gig. And you did give me some gigs, and you said, you should come down to this thing. But I was already on the mailing list, and I had been for like 2 years, but I wasn't able to go. So like, I was on the mailing list when it was at the venue, and I used to get this weird email, and it was like the photograph of this guy, a clip art thing, which it must have come from the thing in St James Centre, but it was like a clip art.
That was Martin got that. That was clip art from Microsoft, and it was a kid in a dentist chair.
It was like, so I was signed up to like every all
logical connection with that
and
and the music scene. I might have a. I was trying to find one. I think I've only got it in the background.
Was this just cheap, free, whatever clip art that you could just attach to?
Yeah, let's see. You can see it in the background there behind Dave's head.
Is Dave here yet?
Yeah, he'll be loving that picture.
Yeah, it's a good one, eh?
This is who's on next. Yeah, he's not changed at all. He looks exactly the same. You see in the background though.
His eyes are a bit redder these days.
I think they've probably taken on film as well. If you look in the background, there's a clip art, there's a skier, and then there's some sort of weird Orthodox priest with a crucifix in his hand. Yeah, that was. I quite like
God,
that.
That really is a terrible poster. Look,
Do you know,
that's brilliant.
That's how the posters would look now if it were up to Olaf, wouldn't it, Olaf? He loves it.
Yeah.
So anyway, look, let's have some sense from Michael.
So
just for a second.
I was on the mailing list. I had been for a couple of years, and I was like, this thing looks quite good, but I can't go anyway. And then Derick was like, you should come down. I think I was 17, so I said, all right, okay, I'll sneak into the street. So I went in the sort of side door of the street off Broughton Street, and and I saw Derick in the distance, but I wasn't able to get to him because there was this like huge guy with mad hair standing in front of me, kind of going, "Hiya, man, how you doing? Who are you?" And so I introduced myself, and he was like, "All right, so you're in a band. Well, you need to meet Vic Galloway then." And I was like, "Vic Galloway's in the room, wow." I got invited back to DJ, and then Olaf invited me to do a panel at the Voodoo Rooms, and then I was enlisted to put up some posters, and then...
That's how it always starts.
Yeah, and then a bit more responsibility.
What, he made you put up posters? Is that
Yeah,
how...
but
No, we would enlist people.
No,
Can
we
you go
had
round town
paid you a
putting posters
tenner
up
for
for
it,
us?
didn't we?
Always.
So anyway, so you've now got a sort of new team involved, and you're putting on the weekly the seminars and talks every time that you put on the night. Any particular highlights? I mean, the Fringe special seemed to have been a highlight. You were telling me about Irvin Welsh and Kristen Hirsch appearing one.
It was a kind of mixture because we do the panels for the rest of the year, but the seminars, and then we'd get the people to DJ afterwards that were on the seminar, which is kind of how we still do it. Bizarrely enough, it's actually harder to get folk to DJ, it seems, than it is to get them on a seminar. It almost attracts two different types of people. With the DJs as well, I have to add that we used to get folk that would come to Born to Be Wide religiously, and as soon as we'd given them a DJ slot, you'd not see them for dust. Yeah, never again would they return. But we always do a special one in August in the Fringe, because we realised there were a lot of people from different things at the book festival or the film festival when it was still taking place then in the Fringe. One year we had Irvin Welsh, Kristen Hirsch from the Throwing Muses and her husband, the drummer from Dodgy and the drummer from a band called The Love Affair that had a hit called Everlasting Love in the 60s. And then, like, Irvin's cousin, who's a boxer, Brad, came in with his big brother, and it turned out I'd been at school with him, and one of my mates had known the guy from Dodgy it was all these really sort of 2 degrees of separation, and it started pissing it down outside, so no one left. You know, everyone had come in before it started raining, and then no one wanted to leave. And the next day I spoke to Kristen's husband, because me and Kristen were on the radio at the same time, and he was like, I've never been so drunk in my life. And everyone was like, great night, but and the next year we got again that we had a Wheel of Fortune that we'd pinched the idea of Fred from Lemon Jelly, and then JP pinched it off us, and they still have their own wheel here. But this is before there was a wheel anywhere else, and we took that along, and I got Ben Dover, the male porn, the adult actor, shall we say, to come and do it, because he was doing a show in the Fringe, and I went up to him, and he was like, "Are Nazareth Scottish?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, yeah, I'll do that. And so, but he didn't have any music, and he just wanted live versions, and he insisted on talking over all the records as well, like in that kind of wedding DJ style. So I had to get him all his music, live versions of AC/DC and Nazareth and all the rest of it. And it all had to be Scottish. And then he talked over the records.
So you've had a fairly eclectic amount of guests. I mean, there's Phil Kay 1 minute, Irvin Welsh the next, Ben Dover, the porn star. You've also had the head of MTV Europe. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, he was a mate of mine. And this is one of these sort of funny bonding experiences because we were at this really cheesy Def Jam birthday party, and the label had morphed into this repulsive sort of organization, and we were both at that, and we were the only guys with long hair at the whole thing. So I got talking to him, and then when I moved back to Edinburgh, it turns out he's from New Zealand, and he was a very avid bagpipe player. So he basically came up, took Martin and I for dinner, paid for it, DJ to the exact second he'd had his set worked out, and then hung out with Francis from Teenage Fan Club because he loved Scottish bands, and he did it. And then one of my favourites was actually the German Consul General, who's this really big guy, and it took about 14 months from first approaching him to actually doing the night, but that was the sort of the very slow turning wheels of German bureaucracy. But one of our meetings, he was like, if we do this, and he was letting me out of the consulate because everyone else had gone home, and he was like, if we do this, I want one of those. And he had this Born to Be Wide hoodie on, and he just kind of pointed at the Born to Be Wide bit, I have to find the photo of this in the break. And so he traveled every 4 years. He was stationed somewhere else. So for many years, the German Foreign Ministry had paid for his vinyl collection to go wherever he was posted. And he did a full vinyl set with a shirt and tie and this big Born to Be Wide hoodie and headphones. It was amazing.
You actually did a special German night, and that was a bit of a sort of launch pad for other things. What happened at the German night?
We got to put a panel together of people from the German music business. So one of the directors of the Reeperbahn Festival, a booking agent, a journalist, someone from the label organization, and it was they did the panel, and then we got a band called Gene's Team to play, and they played, and then we had the DJ set from the Consul General, and that's when we decided we would. I thought it'd be a good idea to launch a music business convention in 7 weeks. So
that was the genesis of what became Wide Days.
Yeah,
and it was also the first time you charged as well.
Yeah, we charged the first time on the German night, and what we realized was more people would come if you charged. Which was interesting because it was, if you don't charge, then no one shows up. Whereas if they pay a couple of quid, then even with that, there's a commitment to it. And so that's how, but we started charging when we moved here. And in those days, you could do drinks promotions as well. So it ended up being a strange situation where people were actually better off here if they had a couple of drinks than they would have been in the previous venue because it was so expensive. But I think that's kind of evened out a bit now. But having said all that, we had a kind of funny thing happen to us a week before we were going to do Wide Days. Initially, I was told that I hadn't made the booking on that day, and then I found So the venue that you were going to host Wide Days in a week before it was going to happen suddenly said, sorry, you can't do it, we haven't got your booking. Well, they first said you can't do the evening gig because we've got a Battle of the Bands contests on, and I was like, okay, you're lost because I know I'd have filled it, right? But then they were like, oh, and you have to finish earlier, and I'm like, well, I think, as far as I know, it's the first time someone's got every major festival promoter in Scotland on one panel. And, not to mention some very illustrious managers, And I'm like, I can't move it anymore. I can't cut them down anymore. And then I phoned up Derick, and Derick was like, yeah, Shanghai will have it. So with a week to go, we're like...
This is Shanghai on George Street. Maybe not known for its rock and roll credentials.
Certainly not. It was an interesting experience. This is where I learned about portion control and the perils of including lunch in a conference. they basically didn't make enough food, but they blamed it on them putting out the wrong bowls, and so we had a bit of a discussion about that. But anyway, apart from that, it was quite successful. So we started doing it 2 days a year. After that, so if any of you haven't bought a ticket, then get one for Wide Days this year on the 9th and 10th.
My feeling is that when Derick sort of got involved, things went up a gear, and then when Michael got involved, things have gone up another couple of gears. Michael, tell me, how did you get involved in actually working with Olaf and Derick, and what you sort of see the future of Born to Be Wide is? Because you have sort of given it an extra oomph, I reckon.
I mean, I got involved because I was in a band, and it was like, I need to meet people in the music industry, I want to get gigs, I want to play festivals, I want to get played on the radio. And every single person that Olaf put me in touch with was someone that could do that for me. So it was like, I'm going to keep going to this, much in the way that Derick was saying that, it was opening doors left, right and centre, and the more that I got involved, the more people that Olaf was introducing me to. And not only that, I was able to phone Olaf up and say, we've been offered this, what do you think? And he'd had years and years of music industry experience that I could draw upon, and because I was getting involved and helping out and doing more and more, I didn't feel bad about doing that kind of thing. So I got more involved in that. Derick was working and doing other bits and bobs and became maybe a bit less involved at that point. And so I guess it was just quite a natural thing that Olaf and I and Derick were doing the majority of the work with some other people, Hannah, who's here, and various other people who have sort of come in and out of the fold as well. And I suppose we just, as a team, we're doing more, and you were taking on more responsibility because you were gaining a bit more trust. And so that's how things have developed. And
any particular sort of highlights of nights that you put on that have been either really successful or really crazy in one way? I remember the photography panel was apparently quite interested in the bevy. Is that right?
That's right. We kind of didn't quite realise how much those particular photographers were going to drink. So I think we had to send someone out to get more beer before the panel had started, And people were like on the panel a bit reeking. And
we got blacklisted from a certain publication.
The first Wide Days would have been the first Wide Days was the highlight, because for me it was like a massive learning curve. I think for all of us it was a massive learning curve, and suddenly you're like, instead of worrying about the panel of all those important festival organisers or illustrious managers, you're worrying about the soup and like, do we have enough wristbands and all these things of like, that putting on an event or a festival for the first time, you're like, holy shit, this is a whole load of extra work that we hadn't thought about. And it's really taken us until now with Wide Days to be, fingers crossed, almost getting there in terms of the organisation.
So what's it like having Michael working with you now? Because he's opened a few other doors. You've got the Off the Record project as well.
I think what I'd say is that none of this, I'm the one constant here, although you pretty much are as well, unofficially, but you've been kind of gone through all the various stages. We never even got to tell them about the Zalmiaki vomit, did we?
No, we moved. You managed to embarrass me in other far more serious ways, so we'll move on if you don't mind.
We'll edit that out, yeah. But really, I think none of the stuff that has been done in the past 10 years would have been, I couldn't have done any of that on my own. And I think that's one of the things, Michael and I have even got an office now, which is quite something. Do
you want to mention some of the other helpers and people involved, because some of them are here as well?
Yeah, well, Gavin and Hannah are both here. They've been involved in various capacities for a long time. I don't know if Craig made it down, and Leslie Ann that helped us from a really early stage. Yannika's disappeared, but she's
Yannika's there. Johnny Fordy somewhere as well.
Tam Coyle, who's our kind of honorary Ouija every time. Bruce, our resident heckler, So I mean, the thing is, as if to cue,
the greatest heckle of all time, I would say.
But I mean, I think the thing is there's a lot of people that have been really closely involved, and then they've had to go off and do other things. But we still kind of find time to hang out occasionally. Because what we noticed as well is that people were coming along to Born to Be Wide nights, and they just weren't prepared. They didn't have any music, or they were doing really simple mistakes. So we're like, let's do an event where we tell everyone what the simple mistakes are, and then they're kind of ready to come along here.
Well, I'd like to thank all our contributors today, to Martin and Brodie at the back with their trophies in their hands, to Michael and Derick, who are here, and of course to the beast incarnate, Olaf Furniss. One last question: if you could have anyone to appear at a Born to Be Wide or a Wide Days and DJ and be on a panel, who would it be? Anyone?
It's got to be Franz Ferdinand. It's unfinished business, yeah? Paul Whitelaw's good for one night, but at some point we've got to have the real thing,
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there's going to be a short break, and then Olaf's going to be back to interview Dave Corbett and David Balfour as well.
Before you depart the stage, Vic, you've actually managed to talk for an hour without mentioning South by Southwest, right? And this is also the 10 years since I was at South by Southwest, and I've got a little something for you here, yeah? If you could like to take it out of the Harvey Nichols bag, it's my South by Southwest Scottish t-shirt from 2004, the Scottish Invasion, with the name of all the bands on the back. So I've been waiting for that to go to a good home. And thank you so much.
I feel honoured. Thank you very much. Happy birthday, Born to Be Wide. There'll be a short break and then Olaf will be back. Make some noise, ladies and gentlemen.